Cheers, guys. Epix911, welcome to the Elitist Geek. VR news for Monday, November 14th, 2016. Let's jump right into VR, guys. Lots to talk about. Start with a bit of preamble. First thing I just wanted to say is and I've said this before, and I mean it with all sincerity, I really appreciate the support. Most of all, I appreciate the comments, the feedback, the critiques, the suggestions, the knowledge, right? All of those. I mean, I really appreciate it. Case in point, having a discussion with one of the viewers, Jefferson Hall, who obviously knows quite a bit, certainly more than I do, about, you know, the area of wireless, 60 gigahertz compression with 4K, etc. So I'm always learning. And it's not that I don't believe him, and I said that as much to you directly, Jefferson. It's that, for me, part of the learning process is not just taking one source, but looking at multiple and, you know, call it the scientific method, whatever the hell you want to call it. Don't just look at your first and take it at face value. If you can, you know, try to base your research on more. And I've certainly been guilty of doing the exact opposite, looking at one source and at times, you know, misinterpreting what the article is saying. We're all human, that happens. But with that said, I love that type of feedback and those types of comments because I do really learn. So, you know the basics as an IT guy. You know, I deal with wireless. I know the protocols, the 802, 11.11, AC, AD, but the real specifics, like what is the data bandwidth required to stream uncompressed 4K, that kind of stuff. Don't have a freaking clue, but as I'm learning and discussing, hopefully I get to the point where I do, and it's certainly going in that direction. So Jefferson, appreciate that. The rest of you, again, likewise, appreciate always. All right, so let's talk about the second bit of preamble here. Martian VR experience based on the Matt Damon movie, and I should have a sample ready with that awesome Matt Damon little vocal thing, but, you know, we'll skip that. But anyways, tomorrow, November 15th, on PlayStation VR and HTC Vive, for $20, you can get the Martian experience. Now, this, Mars is something I've always kind of geeked out on, you know, just loving astronomy, etc. We have a few probes up there, and a lot of the footage, pictures, terrain, textures come from those probes that are used in the Martian experience in VR. For those who don't know, we had probes sent up that landed in 2004 that were only ever designed or expected, more aptly, to operate for 3 months. Okay, this is in 2004. One of them died in 2011. So basically 8 years it got out of that instead of 3 months. The second, which is Opportunity, is still mobile and roaming around in 2016, which is 12 years longer than it was intended to operate, because I think we're at, 12 years, 200 something days. So that is pretty damn impressive. And a third probe also that we sent, which is basically going up a mountain in a crater, Gale Crater and Mount Sharp, I think it is, but super impressive. So a lot of the content, a lot of the assets coming from real life probes that we have up there. So yeah, definitely something I'm going to check out. Hopefully it's immersive and fun. And next up, now not super newsworthy in the sense that it's mind-blowing, but it's an affirmation piece in terms of one of the topics that we've talked about multiple times, virtual reality in the healthcare industry. So Mount Cedar Sinai, which is a hospital, or Cedar Sinai is a hospital in the US, they are trialing virtual reality units in terms of pain management, so treatment for pain. They're also using it to ease inpatients, you know, meditative calming experiences. And right now, the orthopedic wing is using, you know, trialing these. That will be rolled out to more wings of the hospital next month. So very cool to see that actually, you know, in motion, as opposed to just talking about it. And, you know, the benefits could be, well, we're going to find out. because we're doing it now. So first news piece, I'm going to put up a before and current picture. I believe it's Anaheim's Disneyland in the picture that I'm posting. That was indicated in the article. Both amusement parks, Disney World and Land, are getting Star Wars themed areas, which makes sense after the purchase. We also found out that there's going to be a lot of VR content, you know, within that area. So that's why I mention it here. Very cool. The before picture shows 2015. The next picture is currently. So you can see a lot of areas are basically being prepped for construction because all you see is dirt. So very cool. And knowing Disneyland, they can move pretty quick on this stuff, and hopefully it's quality. Next news piece, TPCAST. So almost as quick as we talk about it, post specs, have speculation, have unanswered questions, more importantly. TPCAST makes changes to their website within the last 36 hours to indicate that additional latency for their unit amounts to under 2 milliseconds or less than 2 milliseconds. So if we look at the current unit, it's, you know, mostly agreed that it's 22 milliseconds of latency on the HTC Vive. You add those two in, you're at about 24 milliseconds. Abrash and others have maintained if it's under 25, it's acceptable. Obviously, the lower, the better. And figures for awesome are when you get down to about 7 milliseconds, 8 milliseconds. So very cool to, you know that their solution is within that threshold. You would think it would kind of have to be. How accurate is the 2 milliseconds? Well, until we can independently verify and test that, you know, a little bit of grain of salt there. But if it's true, that's great. That's awesome. So kind of does make me wonder where the 15 millisecond figure was from, but regardless. Next news piece. This one is interesting, very freaking interesting, and it's a VR sales analysis. But as with any analysis or polling or any of that, and we figured that out with the recent election, is take statistics like that with a grain of salt till you can verify, you know, how somebody is arriving at that conclusion or those statistics. You know, dig a little deeper, find out a little bit more, reserve, you know, a final conclusion. So still doesn't mean it's not interesting. It's really interesting. So let's look at the numbers first, and then I'll let you know how the company came about arriving at those numbers. So the company in question is a research firm out of New York, and they are called Super Data Research. You should see the graphic up there, but Oculus Rift, this is for the calendar year 2016. They anticipate 355,088 units. For the Vive, 420,018. Daydream, 450,083. And finally, for Sony PlayStation, 2,602,307 units, which is very, very cool. Now, strange Gear VR's absent from that. I would have loved to have seen those numbers, but again, speculation. Now, as to how they got these numbers, this is their own words here. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's pretty lengthy, but the gist of it being the approach to the market for consumer-centered virtual reality includes retail checks, executive interviews with decision makers from all the firms that are in that marketplace, pricing data, survey-based consumer tracking panel, digital content purchases collected from data providers, combined with proprietary and public data sources to arrive at an objective reading of the market, including financial information, etc., etc. It goes on. Like I said, the link will be below. But if you look at those numbers, and I've used this one to death, I'm going to officially retire it, but is my citing the Sony PlayStation, the original PlayStation, as having taken the 18 months to reach 1 million units. Well, you can pull out another one, which was the Apple iPhone. We know ultimately how successful that unit was, what it did to BlackBerry, etc., or rather, research in motion. But, you know, it took them quite a while. It was 1.3 million units by the end of the first year. So if you look at that, factor in the costs, factor in, the split market from the point of view that there are multiple offerings, especially on the PC side of the equation, those numbers don't look bad at all, in my opinion. They look very healthy, and provided, the things that we anticipate still coming actually come, better games, better quality games, more lengthy experiences for those of us in it for games and experiences. The fact that it's in hospitals and all these other areas, I don't think VR is going anywhere. I think that number is going to ramp up. The Sony one looks really promising. If you look at it, 40 million users, 2 million by the end of the year. All 40 million people aren't going to like the same genres. So your actual potential of that 40 million is smaller than the 40 million. How is that going to play out with virtual reality? Genres matter still in VR to some degree, but it's not quite the same. People who are wanting to experience VR will probably cross boundaries just to, amass different experiences. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Either way, very cool and very interesting to look at those numbers. Next up, we have the top 10 most downloaded PlayStation VR games. So I'm going to jump that up. We don't need to go through each of these, but check that out. Job Simulator is number 1. It was a $30 title. And Sports Bar number 10, $20 title. Of interest to me here in this list is Eve Valkyrie. So my guess would be, obviously some of the people purchasing it have already purchased it, maybe on one of the other VR platforms if they've owned it, or, certainly on the PC. Or are most of these people purchasing it, people who have no copy of Eve Valkyrie? Like that's a breakdown that would be interesting to me. Let's guess that a lot of the people who bought this for the PlayStation don't have it for that reason. They already own it. Then that's a pretty cool statistic. But without units sold, it doesn't tell us exactly what we would like. But still, as a top 10 list, it's pretty interesting. Next news piece, Oculus update. This is the one that officially adds a bunch of things. The asynchronous time warp, the Guardian, which is their chaperone-like feature, and the ability to rate games and experiences on the Oculus Store. Now, there are people out there that have the touch and that additional camera, and the feedback from many of those has been pretty positive that it works well. The one issue that comes up a few times, though, is the one of cables. Now, obviously, with lighthouses in the Vive, it's cable-free for the most part. There is a cable, and you can use it. It's a very, very long 3.5 millimeter stereo cable. But yeah, it can be used if you have issues with line of sight between the two. But yeah, the fact that all this stuff is included, including the Guardian feature, very, very cool. What remains to be seen is, do they stray from the original that, look, Rift is a seated standing experience, or do devs start venturing into room scale territory with some of the stuff? That is of interest to me. Next up, Otoy, doing amazing things in VR graphically. Now, I've mentioned these guys twice before. Last time, I believe, was October 4th, and it was that light field cube rendering that they were doing, where they basically take a picture 360 and there's a bit of movement in each direction. So when you're looking at that experience, you've got the ability with a super photorealistic picture of being able to look around in it. So they're already known, and a couple of you pointed this out to me, thought of highly in the graphic community, especially graphical development. Their Octane render capability is, pretty widespread, at least knowledge of it within the film industry. In the link that I'm going to include, there's a really cool beginning part that I didn't know was from Otoy, and it's for a series that I'm enjoying with my wife called Westworld, based on the 70s movie. But very cool technology in that what they're able to do with the Octane render, for example, is take a scene and convert that into a graphical scene via integration with Unity. So Integration in Unity, they say, is going to be across the board for all versions next year in 2017 and free, which is very cool and very powerful. I've included the link. It shows a lot more than I can possibly describe. Have a look if that interests you at all. That's Otoy, and like I said, amazing graphical things. All right, the next story, and this is kind of the last one here that I want to talk about, comes to us from one of the viewers, Ray Pope. He actually told me about this Friday. No excuse other than I've been very busy, and it's increasingly just getting tougher to answer a lot of the comments. But I'm going to keep trying for sure. Now, the article that he linked me had to do with Australia, and here's the headline: VR booming, but Australia risks missing out, experts warn. And here's the gist of the link, rather than describing it. Let's actually read it. If Australia is going to be competitive and get more jobs in the digital economy, then it needs to support more development and investment within the digital economy and provide incentives for people, investors who may be interested in supporting the development of stories on new platforms. And, having read that and looked at that, I don't think that's unique to just Australia. On the one extreme, you've got, a country like China. Take them, for example. If there's a bubble in this, they stand to lose the most because they've gone literally all in one direction, right? All in with their chips. Then you've got the Australia, and like I said, it's not limited to just Australia. You've got the other countries that are on the far other end of the spectrum. I mean, there's consumers in those countries that want to purchase, but the development scene, the investment is lacking. And that's all the article is really saying, but I got to agree. There are other countries, and, take that one step further and say it's not just Australia. All right, that's it for the news, guys. As always, cheers, and definitely catch you guys on the VR flip side.